So I watched Killers of the Flower Moon last month, and boy, that's a long film right there. Did I hate it? Absolutely not. Did I like it? Not really. Why? Well, I think it was definitely too long, surprise surprise. So long, in fact, that it sparked the idea for this video. I walked out of that theater with a few questions in mind. Was it really necessary for this film to be as long as it is? Are these 3 to 4 hour films Martin Scorsese talks about truly cinema? And am I just crazy for not really enjoying these types of films? Well, let's try to find out. First things first, this won't be a flat-out attack on Scorsese, but I will be touching on his filmography quite a bit because he has a reputation for making some lengthy boys. But what exactly defines a lengthy boy? I consider any movie over 3 hours to be a quote-unquote long movie. Although if the runtime is over 2.5, you're definitely starting to push it. Of course, this is all pretty subjective, time is relative and all that jazz. So you may disagree with me about what qualifies as a long movie. Hell, you may even disagree with me about there being an issue here in the first place. I mean, 3 out of the top 5 highest grossing films ever made are all over 3 hours long. But I think this says a lot more about these franchises, and James Cameron, than it does about long movies. Really, Avatar: The Way of the Water made it up there. I honestly don't remember anything from that film except for all the bros that kept saying bro.
Bro, we've got to check this out.
Bro, that's disgusting! Bro! That was insane, cuz!
Look, I love Big Marty. This man has undeniably had a hand in shaping the landscape of filmmaking as it is today. I mean, he directed Taxi Driver, which has served as the template for numerous films since its release, and is essentially the gateway to becoming a film bro. Seriously though, this man somehow directed The Last Temptation of Christ and The Wolf of Wall Street. He's one of the greats, and there's no doubt about it. That being said, I haven't really been a fan of his recent work. With runtimes that have progressively gotten longer and longer over the course of his career, it just feels like Scorsese's MO has shifted toward resisting the commercialization of the film industry. And this is no more clear than in Killers of the Flower Moon. See, I genuinely feel like I could have enjoyed this film. When the trailer would play in a Dolby or IMAX theater, with that music booming, I'd be hyped. This story is also centered around some pretty important historical topics that aren't talked about nearly enough. And you got an all-star cast, like, come on. It's pretty safe to say I was excited for this film. But when I finally got a chance to see it, it just took so long to get to the point. Toward the beginning of the film, I actually felt like the pacing was pretty solid, but I quickly realized what I thought was the midpoint was probably just the end of the first act. I mean, Jesse Plemons doesn't even show up until like close to 3 hours in, dude.
I was sent down from Washington, D.C. to see about these murders.
So what about him?
See who's doing it.
After this film ended, I couldn't help but be reminded of Taylor Sheridan's 2015 film, Wind River. This is a story that deals with some similar topics that Killers of the Flower Moon deals with, but it also happens to be half the runtime. Despite this, I feel Wind River has had much more of a substantial impact on me. I'm not claiming these films should have been the same length, they're definitely two different stories with very different goals. But Wind River does prove that you can tell an impactful story within a concise runtime.
You got blood on your shirt.
Yeah, I just came from work.
Who was the victim today?
Looks like it's gonna be me.
The real reason I think this topic has been on my mind is probably due to some unresolved trauma from Big Marty's last film, The Irishman. I also saw this one in theaters, and to this day I really wish I hadn't. After a spur-of-the-moment decision while out with some friends, I found myself sitting in a stuffy, crowded theater for 3.5 hours, just waiting for this film to end. Which ironically might have been the point of the story, because it's all about getting old and stuff, I think. To be honest, I couldn't tell you much of what happens in this film. I remember De Niro's uncanny, de-aged face. He also beats up a guy very unconvincingly. And there's that part where they're talking about fish.
What kind of fish? What? What kind of fish? I don't know, the kind you eat? A fish.
This is a trend I've noticed with long movies. Despite sitting in front of a screen for hours on end, I can't seem to remember much of what happens in these stories. Yes, maybe I have a short attention span after more than a decade of my brain being deep fried by TikToks and Vines, rip, but I also think it's pretty easy to be overwhelmed by all of the information a movie like this presents to you at once. Everything tends to get jumbled together. This doesn't mean long-form storytelling can't be effective though. Just look at any great TV show to prove this point.
It was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
When discussing the topic of long movies, someone almost always makes the comparison to TV, and why it's so difficult to sit through a 3.5-hour film when it can be a breeze to binge 5 one-hour-long episodes. This is a valid argument, but I think the key difference here is that TV shows create a genuine sense of progression. They're dynamic. Think about it like this. You're chilling on your phone watching some YouTube. Is it easier to pay full attention to a single 20-minute video or scroll through dozens of YouTube shorts for 20 minutes? Most people these days would probably go with the latter. This is essentially the difference between long movies and serial television. And don't worry, I see the irony in this comparison because this is probably a 20-minute video that you're watching right now. Regardless, this admittedly oversimplified comparison hopefully shows why TV is often more engaging than a singular film. Netflix's recent limited series Beef is a great example of a show I found myself unable to stop watching. I powered through these 10 episodes in like 3 or 4 days, which is probably rookie numbers for some people.
I gotta pump those numbers up. Those are rookie numbers in this racket.
But despite having watched Beef several months ago, I could easily lay out a much more detailed breakdown of the plot than I could with Killers of the Flower Moon, which I saw a few weeks ago. This is because each episode of a TV series essentially serves as a checkpoint, with its own 4-act structure and narrative beats that must be hit. While these episodes may be a part of a larger story, each one features its own self-contained narrative as well.
You gotta take control, man.
I am in control.
Oh, yeah? What's your plan then?
I'm gonna take a shit, and I'm gonna go play ball.
No, like in your life.
The inherent structure of serial television awards you a luxury you just don't get with long movies, and that is the ability to stop and digest the story. Beef most likely could have been condensed into a single film, but this would not have done the story justice, and it probably wouldn't have had the same emotional impact come the finale. With TV, yes, you spend much more time within the story than even the longest movies out there, but you're also given time away from it as well. Now, I do think the dynamics of a long movie can change if you watch it at home and have the ability to pause periodically, but I'm pretty certain that's not how Big Marty intended for you to experience his stories.
And having to be seen on a big screen with a large audience, it's really getting the reactions from the people you can feel around you, and it all becomes one experience. That's something that is very special.
Usually when a director is given the green light to make a film over 3 hours long, the idea is that it's out of necessity for the story. They want to give the story time to breathe and allow characters to grow, all with the ultimate goal of impacting the audience. But simply giving a story more time to breathe doesn't guarantee that the film will actually have an impact. And I honestly feel like the longer a film is, the less impact it usually has. On the flip side, you have short films, which I feel almost always pack way more of a punch when compared to longer films.
You know, मैं TV देख रहा हूँ.
Abu, this is, you can watch television anytime, it's 24-hour news, nothing changes.
In the way, you're not transparent.
Abu, you see the news all the time, man. Come to it. Do it full speed, man. I'm not scared. I'm not scared, bro.
Short films work because you are introduced to some information, you go on a journey, and then that same information is typically brought back and subverted in some type of way, all within a matter of minutes. You don't really have time to daydream or forget about certain plot points. Short films leverage every second of screen time for the viewing experience, often cramming little details in that you don't even notice until the 3rd or 4th viewing. They're also easily digestible, able to be rewatched over and over again in the same amount of time it would take to watch a single 3-hour film. This is a great segue into one of my favorite short films of all time, More, directed by Mark Osborne, who also co-directed Kung Fu Panda. Talk about directorial range. Fittingly enough, More says much more than any 3 or 4 hour film I've ever seen, without actually saying a single word. In just 6 minutes and 23 seconds, this story has stuck with me for years. No dialogue, no groundbreaking visual effects, no big action sequences, just a haunting story about the pursuit of happiness. I've watched this short countless times, yet there are still new details I pick up each time I revisit it. This is not by accident, it's by design. No time can be wasted in a film this short, so it must be made with efficiency in mind. I interrupt this long video about long movies to briefly talk about today's sponsor, Harbour London. Harbour London is a brand offering high-quality functional goods for everyday life. They make backpacks, laptop sleeves, wallets, you name it. Many of these products are made with genuine leather, handcrafted in Spain. And if you know me, I'm a leather fanatic, so I was super excited to get my hands on some of these products. Their commuter bag is a mid-sized leather and recycled backpack designed to carry all of your daily essentials. This can include items like a laptop, camera, limited edition adult Happy Meal Grimace toy, an entire loaf of sourdough bread, and a stick of dynamite. Wait, what? In case you missed it, they also offer this microfiber laptop sleeve, which I found is perfect for protecting my 6-year-old MacBook that I actually edited this video on. I'm looking to get a few more years out of this baby, so it's good to have some protection. Oh, and of course, I gotta mention their bifold leather wallet, which does a phenomenal job of holding all the money I don't have, but it does have this pretty cool pull tab to slide out a couple of cards you may not use very often. Overall, I'm thoroughly impressed by the quality of these Harbour London products, and I'm glad I get to promote this brand. This wasn't the first sponsorship I could have taken, but it was the first I said yes to, because these are products I genuinely like and use. If you're interested, check out the Harbour London website to pick up something nice for yourself, or maybe grab a gift for someone in your life. You can find more information in the description below. Thanks again to Harbour London for sponsoring this video. Now, let's get back into it.
You know, my favorite thing about the movie is like it feels like a movie. It feels like a real, like, you know, go to the theater film movie that, you know, you kind of, the reason why you go to watch something on the big screen.
Back in college, my philosophy professor said something that has stuck with me ever since. He claimed that film is the most inefficient form of art because it must provide the most information for complete comprehension. He explained that efficiency, and most importantly, interpretation, are at the heart of art. So, a 3-hour film that must feed you constant dialogue and plot progression to get a message across is arguably less impactful than a speck of paint on a canvas. This is because you need to fill in all of the blanks when viewing a painting like this. You aren't spoon-fed information. You need to draw your own conclusions from what is given to you. Now, do I agree with his assessment on film? No. But I do think there's a hint of truth in what he said. I feel efficiency should always be at the forefront of good filmmaking. Many screenwriters talk about how to tell a story as fast and as simply as possible. There's even a common saying in screenwriting, arrive late, leave early, which essentially means you should only begin a scene or a story when it is absolutely imperative to start, and leave at the earliest possible chance. This is all about providing the bare bones amount of information needed to get the point across. It allows the viewer to fill in all of the gaps, and it keeps the story engaging because you need to be active while watching. It also prevents the story from getting sidelined with things that aren't necessarily important to the plot. In general, longer films just don't seem to have this sense of urgency, sometimes slowing down to a complete crawl. This opens the door for the viewer to begin daydreaming about other things and inevitably check out altogether.
He's dead.
Who's dead?
Your attorney, Mr. Regano.
He's dead?
Yeah.
Who did it?
Cancer.
It's hard to come up with a better example of effective storytelling than in Denis Villeneuve's 2015 film, Sicario. This is a masterclass in efficient storytelling. The pace at the beginning of this film is quick, but these sweeping shots aid in the story progression, at times literally guiding your eye to the focal point of the scene. From the opening scene, this story rushes forward unrelentingly until we hit that scene near the end, when everything suddenly comes to a screeching halt. This is when we finally get all of the answers, and it is so damn effective. If you've watched the film, you know exactly which scene I'm talking about.
Go ahead and finish your meal.
I'm a firm believer in the idea that nearly every detail in a film should hold some sort of value to the story. Every shot and every line of dialogue should be intentional for the sake of providing information. This shows respect toward the audience, and in return, it keeps them engaged with the story. When I go into a movie over 3 hours, there comes a point when I almost always start to think more about how much is left than about the story itself. It's like the runtime becomes a character within the narrative, holding a weight over each scene. Hell, it holds a weight over the whole movie. What was the primary topic of discussion when The Irishman, Avatar 2, and Killers of the Flower Moon were all hitting theaters? Most of the time it was not, hey, the movie looks awesome. But more likely it was, hey, you hear how long it is? For better or worse, this narrative surrounding the runtime tends to become an inseparable aspect of the film's identity.
What is everyone talking about? The runtime?
Some people say they don't feel the running time. I felt the running time.
This is a 3.5-hour movie, as I'm sure most reviews you read and watch will tell you.
Really good movie. Really could have been 40 minutes shorter.
But is this runtime the best possible runtime to tell this story?
Look, I don't think shortening films is the end-all be-all solution here. I think filmmakers should be free to tell stories as they see fit. But I do think having some drive and a purpose sets great films apart from the rest. I may sound a bit like a broken record with my previous video on how to end a series, but great films and TV don't overstay their welcome. With these long movies, I often feel the narrative meanders and loses track getting to the point, thus defeating itself in the process. Now, do I think long movies should stop being made? No. Sometimes I feel a hefty runtime is justified when telling a story. Big Marty would probably cringe at what I'm about to say, but in the case of something like Avengers Endgame, the culmination of over a decade's worth of films, it makes sense that this story would be as long as it is. But just as worthy of a long runtime is Titanic, a film that hinges on and even leverages the tension of an event we all know is inevitable. Somehow James Cameron has circumvented the issues that tend to plague long movies. While I still think Avatar 2 was way longer than it needed to be, Cameron has managed to find a sweet spot in telling sweeping epics that also make a ton of money. And really, that's what it's all about in Hollywood.
Get to out of here.
Hurry up! Bro!
I'm sure Scorsese has a dedicated core audience that loves his films and is able to sit through them without any issue. But I think a majority of filmgoers don't want to sign up for this, which might be the reason why Killers of the Flower Moon is struggling a bit at the box office. And yeah, maybe Scorsese isn't too concerned with making profitable films, but I think every director should be to some degree, because that's how you continue to get films made. If a smaller director without Scorsese's reputation had made this film, and made the same amount of money, they would likely have a hard time getting another film financed. Don't get me wrong, I can see why this film has received critical praise, and why it will most likely have a solid Oscars run, but the execution is ultimately what held me back from appreciating it more. I feel long movies often miss out on the benefits of both longer and shorter form storytelling. They're kind of like an awkward middle child in that way. Would this film have worked better as a miniseries? I'm not sure, but seeing as this is a book adaptation, the story may have been better suited for something more than just a singular film. Personally, I would love to see a 6 to 8 episode miniseries from Scorsese, because I think this would negate many of the issues I've personally found in his recent films. But let's be real. He isn't exactly as youthful as he once was, so it's clear he probably won't be changing his ways anytime soon. And to be honest, I can kinda see where he's coming from. As someone who grew up with old school YouTube, I've been very resistant toward the massive shift of short form content found on TikTok. I personally like to make these 20 to 30 minute videos that most people won't even watch. So I don't even know if I can really blame the man. Big Marty will continue to do what he does, and hey, maybe the next one will prove me wrong. But what do you think? Are long movies tough to get through, or do you enjoy hunkering down for a good 3 to 4 hours to experience a story in full? Let me know down below. Anyway, thanks for watching, and have a good one.